They say that Albert Einstein wrote a puzzle as a young man and claimed that 98% of the world couldn't crack it. Now, whether he actually wrote it or not, the premise itself is absolutely legendary. Are you part of the average majority, or do you have the raw, unfiltered logical power to join that elite 2%? Well, welcome to this explainer, where we are going to unpack the actual architecture of genius-level logic. I want to frame this right away. This challenge isn't a test of your advanced math skills, and it is certainly not about trivia. We're looking at a gamified challenge here. The real test is whether you can navigate a clear, logical path through a literal mountain of modern chaos. I mean, think about it. If you can't organize 5 houses, 5 pets, and 5 drinks in your head, how do you expect to navigate the massive complexities of the 21st century? This right here is the starting line for what we call computational thinking. And frankly, it's where most people just give up and start guessing. So let's look at the setup of that infamous Einstein puzzle. Picture this. A rare fish is stolen, and you, the top detective, are looking at 5 identical houses. Here are your variables. 5 different houses, painted 5 different colors, inhabited by men of 5 different nationalities, who each drink a different beverage, smoke a different brand of cigar, and keep a different pet. Attempting to organize the sheer density of variables purely in your head feels basically impossible. Your brain just crashes under the cognitive load, right? You're handed a list of seemingly disconnected clues, like the man who smokes Pall Mall keeps birds or the Swede keeps dogs, and you're just left to figure out the whole shebang. So the crucial point is how you actually survive this puzzle. It requires pure deduction. The secret weapon here isn't a massive IQ, it's the rigorous, relentless application of the process of elimination and trial and error. The sources show that solving this is a lot like playing a giant game of Sudoku. You map it out, and look, if you make a wrong assumption early on, you will hit a dead end. But through deliberate trial and error, you narrow down the absolute truth. This isn't just about finding a stolen fish, it's the exact same foundational logic used to solve complex multivariable equations or even explain the nature of the universe. All right, moving on to level 2, Smullyan's truth trap. Enter Raymond Smullyan, the mathematician who took the simple concepts of truth and lies and turned them into an absolute psychological battlefield. He popularized the classic knights and knaves scenario. You land on an island with 2 types of people, the noble knight, who always speaks the absolute truth, and the smug knave, who always lies. It sounds super simple, right? But when a resident makes a convoluted statement, these contradictions easily trip up the average mind. We walk into these traps because naturally we intuitively try to trust what we hear. But the pros? They don't rely on intuition. Instead, they use a truth table mapped out in their minds, just like the one you see here. You assume a hypothesis. For example, let's assume person A is a knave. And then you relentlessly hunt for logical contradictions like a predator. If assuming they're a knave means their statement would actually be true, well, boom, you have a contradiction. If you can't figure out who is lying in a simple logic puzzle, you're essentially walking through real life with your eyes closed. Logic is the foundation of life, so are you building your decisions on sand? Which brings us to level 3, the boss level, the hardest logic puzzle ever. Think you're a logic master? Try this one. In 1996, the logician George Boulos published a problem that made even hardcore puzzle enthusiasts despair. Here are the brutal rules of this boss level. You face 3 cosmic gods, true, false, and random. You must identify who is who by asking just 3 yes or no questions. But the massive, mind-bending catch? They only answer in a secret language, saying duh or ja. You have absolutely no idea which word means yes and which means no. So how do you possibly solve a puzzle where the answers mean literally nothing to you? Well, the key to defeating this boss level is wielding something called counterfactual conditionals. Instead of asking a direct question, you ask what would happen under a hypothetical condition. You embed a question inside a question. For example, you ask, if I asked you if 2 plus 2 equals 4, would you say ja? By structuring the logic this way, you force a double positive or a double negative. It completely short-circuits that secret language barrier and forces the god to reveal a usable truth, regardless of what ja or da actually mean. It's brilliant. And this illustrates just how deep logic can actually go. Researchers looking into this puzzle found a fascinating workaround to deal with that highly annoying random god. They realized you could ask an unanswerable paradoxical question. If you ask a god a question that forces a contradiction, like are you going to answer this question with the word that means no, a truth-telling god literally cannot answer. Researchers joked that in the face of this paradox, the god remains silent, or effectively its head just explodes. By using paradoxes, you eliminate variables without even getting an answer. Okay, let's pivot to section 4, The survival skill, computational thinking. Now, if your brain is hurting a little bit right now, good. That's the feeling of your computational thinking finally waking up. Let's get real. Programming isn't just for geeks. It's a universal language of science and engineering. In the 21st century, if you can't think computationally, you're just a passenger. Research outlines 5 core concepts here. First, abstraction, ignoring the distracting junk to find the core truth. Second, pattern recognition, seeing the hidden rules that everyone else misses. Third, decomposition, taking a massive, terrifying problem and shredding it into bite-sized, manageable tasks. Fourth, generalization, turning a single, one-time win into a permanent, repeatable rule. And finally, evaluation, having the humility to admit you're wrong and fixing the bugs in your own head. Notice how a deliberate flowchart is used here to map out winning strategies. What this proves is that trial and error is absolutely not a sign of failure. It is a deliberate algorithmic process. You map the outcomes, test the branches, and find a coherent solution. When you train your brain to think computationally like this, you stop reacting emotionally and you start dismantling problems systematically. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the outro, the tortoise's warning. Before we crown logic as our flawless savior, let's look at a fascinating philosophical twist. Back in 1895, Lewis Carroll wrote a dialogue between Achilles and a surprisingly stubborn tortoise. Achilles tries to force the tortoise to accept a basic logical conclusion. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. But the tortoise refuses to accept that final step without a new rule explaining why the first 2 rules lead to the third, so Achilles writes down a new rule. Then the tortoise asks for a rule to justify that rule, and on forever. Carroll was warning us about infinite regression. If you relentlessly demand a premise for every single logical step, you will completely paralyze yourself with overthinking. Logic is a tool, sure, but if you get trapped in the theory of it, you'll never actually make a decision. The goal isn't just to be logical, it's to be efficient. The modern world is only getting louder and more complex every single day. So, are you going to keep stumbling through it, guessing your way from one problem to the next? Or are you going to start thinking computationally to secure your place in that top tier? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Subscribe if you think you can handle the next level. Or don't, if you're perfectly content being part of the 98%.